Los Angeles, midnight. A police siren wails. A cop pulls his gun, aiming straight at Hollywood icon. The actor who's dodged bullets on screen now faces one in real life. But this cop isn't acting. Cameras roll. The crowd screams. What they don't know. This cop once saved Hollywood icon's life, and tonight he'll destroy his own. What happens next? A letter, a secret, and a redemption story you won't believe. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment, smash like, and subscribe for true stories that'll wreck your algorithm. Los Angeles, midnight. The streets hum with distant traffic, the neon glow of Sunset Boulevard reflecting off wet pavement. The low rumble of an engine cuts through the silence. A vintage motorcycle, sleek and well-maintained, glides down the road. The rider, clad in a worn leather jacket and jeans, is none other than Hollywood icon, fresh from a charity event, heading home. His mind is at ease, lost in thought about the children he had just helped. Then, siren.
Flashing red and blue lights explode behind him. A squad car accelerates, tailing him aggressively. The distant wail turns into a piercing screech as the patrol car's speaker blares. "Pull over, now!" Hollywood icon slows, smoothly pulling to the curb. The night is still again, except for the sound of approaching footsteps. Heavy boots scrape against the pavement. A tall officer emerges. Mark Reynolds, his face lined with exhaustion, eyes burning with something deeper than routine authority. His hand hovers over his holstered gun. Hollywood icon removes his helmet, revealing his unmistakable face. For most, this would have been the moment the tension eased, but not for Mark. "Step out of the vehicle," he commands, his tone sharp, edged with something personal. Hollywood icon doesn't argue. He calmly places both hands in view and swings his leg over the bike, standing tall but unthreatening. "License and registration," Mark barks. Hollywood icon moves slowly, reaching for his pocket. But something shifts in Mark's posture. His fingers tighten around the grip of his firearm. His breath is uneven, his jaw clenched. "Stop, right there," Mark snaps, stepping back. His pulse is pounding. Hollywood icon freezes. The weight of the moment is palpable. His voice, calm but steady, carries through the night. "Officer, let's talk. I'm unarmed." A small crowd gathers. Pedestrians slow their steps. Some pull out their phones. A few are already recording. The situation escalates in real time, tension rising with each passing second. The officer's hand grips his gun harder, knuckles turning white. Then it happens. Mark pulls his weapon, aimed directly at Hollywood icon's chest. Gasps erupt from the bystanders. A woman's voice breaks through the tension. "Oh my God, is that Hollywood icon?" The collective realization spreads like wildfire. More cameras go up. The moment is immortalized in shaky footage and shocked whispers. Hollywood icon doesn't flinch. His hands remain raised, his expression unreadable. "Officer, please," he says, voice low, almost imploring. "This doesn't have to go this way." A second squad car screeches to a halt. Doors fly open. Mark's superior officer rushes toward the scene, eyes darting between the drawn gun and the Hollywood star standing motionless before it. "Stand down, Reynolds," the commander barks. The command cuts through the fog of Mark's mind, yanking him back to reality. His grip loosens. The gun lowers, shaking slightly as it's holstered. Within minutes, body cam footage is reviewed. The verdict is swift. Mark is ordered to surrender his badge and gun on the spot. The crowd murmurs as whispers turn into a wave of condemnation. Phones stay raised. The internet is watching. Hollywood icon remains quiet as the situation unfolds. No anger, no protests. Just a lingering look in his eyes, one that sees deeper than the chaos in front of him. By the time Mark's suspension is confirmed, the video has already gone viral. The world is about to erupt. The internet is ablaze. Within hours, the video of Officer Mark Reynolds pulling a gun on Hollywood icon spreads like wildfire. Social media ignites and news headlines are relentless. Hollywood icon held at gunpoint by LAPD officer. Outrage as viral video shows cop drawing gun on movie star. Suspended officer faces backlash after. Targeting Hollywood icon, Twitter erupts with fury. Thousands of tweets flood in every second. Unbelievable. Hollywood icon is literally the kindest person alive. How could this happen? This officer needs to be fired now. No excuses. If this can happen to Hollywood icon, imagine what happens to people without cameras watching. The outrage spreads across Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Comment sections are vicious. Millions have seen the video within the first 12 hours. Talk shows are dissecting it. Political analysts are debating it. The public wants action, and they want it fast. Meanwhile, Mark Reynolds sits alone in his dark apartment, staring at the glowing screen of his phone. His hands are stiff, gripping the device like a lifeline, but every notification is another knife to the gut. His name is trending for all the wrong reasons. He scrolls through comment after comment. The words blur together, but the hate is clear. Fire him. Unfit for the badge. Hollywood icon should press charges and make an example out of him. His inbox is overflowing. Reporters are begging for interviews. His department is refusing to comment. Friends, colleagues, even people he thought had his back are going silent. His jaw tightens. Just days ago, he was another officer doing his job. Now, he's the villain of the internet. He runs his hands through his hair, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. But beyond the outrage, beyond the headlines, something else is gnawing at him. Hollywood icon, that face, it won't leave his mind. But it's not just because Hollywood icon is famous. It's something else, something deeper. Mark rubs his temples, trying to push the thought away. But it lingers. Somewhere in his past, he's seen that face before, and it's tearing him apart. Meanwhile, Hollywood icon remains silent. No statements, no retaliation, no anger. Instead, he studies the man who nearly pulled the trigger. He looks past the headlines, past the outrage, because Hollywood icon sees something no one else does. Not just anger in Mark's eyes, pain. And for some reason, Hollywood icon can't shake the feeling that this story isn't over yet. Mark expects legal action. He expects an arrest warrant, a lawsuit, anything but what actually arrives. A letter. It's slipped under his door. No return address, no markings, just a plain envelope, sealed with nothing but silence. Mark stares at it for a long moment before finally bending down and picking it up. His fingers hesitate, then rip it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a message written by hand. Mark, sometimes the pain we carry makes us act in ways we don't recognize. I've been there too. I hope you find peace. Hollywood icon. Mark's breath catches. His fingers tighten around the paper. He reads it again and again. His heart pounds as the words sink in. Hollywood icon is offering him something Mark knows he doesn't deserve. Understanding, mercy, a way out. Why? After everything. Mark should feel relief. Instead, he feels something else. Something worse. The weight of shame is crushing. His throat tightens. He doesn't deserve this. He doesn't deserve any of it. Mark stares at the letter until his vision blurs. He sets it on the table, hands shaking. Then, for the first time since the incident, he starts remembering. His mind drifts, back in time. 9 years ago, a cold hospital room, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, the smell of antiseptic and grief. Mark is standing by a hospital bed, watching his wife fight for every breath. His daughter, Emma, sits by her side, gripping her frail hand. Christmas Eve. A stranger walks in, a man carrying gifts. Mark had barely looked at him then. He was too consumed by loss, too numb to notice the way the stranger knelt beside his daughter, handing her a small wrapped box. Too blind to recognize the kindness of a man who asked for nothing in return. Now, as he sits alone in his apartment, staring at the letter, the memory slams into him. The stranger that night? It was Hollywood icon. Mark stumbles to his feet. His breath comes in sharp, uneven gasps. He paces the room, his thoughts racing. Hollywood icon, the man he nearly shot in a fit of misplaced rage, was the very same man who once saved his family. He grips the edges of the table, his knuckles white. The weight of realization crushes him. He had repaid kindness with cruelty. Mark exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. His chest feels tight, his stomach twisted in knots. There's only one thing left to do. He has to find Hollywood icon, not just to apologize, to understand why. Mark tears through his apartment like a man possessed. His breath is ragged, his hands shake. He pulls open drawers, yanks books off shelves, scatters papers across the floor. He needs proof, something to confirm what his memory is screaming at him. Then, his fingers freeze. A dusty old photo album, wedged between forgotten paperwork. He grabs it, flipping through pages with frantic urgency. Old memories flash before him, his wedding, Emma's childhood, family trips. Then he stops. His heart pounds. There, a grainy snapshot, nearly a decade old. A hospital room. His wife Susan, gaunt but smiling. Emma, barely 10, sitting beside her. And in the background, a man. Hollywood icon. Mark's throat tightens. He stares, willing the image to change, for the impossible to be a mistake. But it's real. Hollywood icon is there, holding a stack of gifts, his expression warm and gentle. The moment hits like a tidal wave. 9 years ago. Christmas Eve. Mark remembers the despair that night. Susan had been dying, her treatments draining their savings. They couldn't afford the experimental procedure that might have given her more time. That night, a stranger had arrived at the hospital. He had moved quietly, handing out presents to sick children, stopping at each bed to offer a kind word. Mark had barely noticed. He had been drowning in his own grief, but Emma had noticed. She had clutched a gift to her chest, eyes wide with wonder, whispering, "Mom, he looks like that movie star." Mark had brushed it off. A coincidence, he had thought. It couldn't have actually been him. But now, holding the photograph in his hands, he knows the truth. Hollywood icon had been there, not as an actor, not as a celebrity, but as a man helping families who had nothing left. And Mark had repaid him by treating him like a criminal. The guilt is suffocating. His legs feel weak, his chest tight. He grips the album tighter, knuckles white. Why? Why would Hollywood icon do that for them? Why would he show up for strangers, pay for treatments, ask for nothing? And more importantly, why would he forgive Mark now? The weight of it crushes him. Mark slams the album shut, running a trembling hand through his hair. His mind is a storm of emotions, guilt, confusion, disbelief. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. Not after what he did. But he needs answers. He needs to find Hollywood icon. Now. Mark grips the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. The city lights blur as he speeds through Los Angeles, his mind racing faster than his car. The weight of his past mistakes presses down on him, suffocating. Hollywood icon, the man he nearly shot, the man who saved his family. Mark clenches his jaw. He has no plan, no idea what he'll say, but he knows one thing: he has to find Hollywood icon. The police precinct won't help him. He's suspended, cut off from department resources. But he knows people. He still has contacts. He makes calls, digging for information. A former colleague finally gives him a lead. Hollywood icon has a house outside the city, secluded, private. Mark wastes no time. He follows the directions, driving toward the outskirts of Los Angeles. The streets give way to quieter roads, lined with trees and dimly lit houses. Finally, he pulls up to a modest home. No security gates, no extravagant signs of wealth, just a quiet house nestled in the hills, bathed in the soft glow of porch lights. Mark hesitates, his heartbeat pounds in his ears. This is a mistake. He shouldn't be here. But then he remembers the letter, Hollywood icon's words, "I hope you find peace." Mark swallows hard. He steps out of the car, his boots crunching against the gravel. His hands are clammy as he walks up the narrow path to the front door. His breath is unsteady. He raises his fist. Knocks. Silence. A few seconds pass. Then the door creaks open. Hollywood icon stands in the doorway. He's dressed simply, just a hoodie and jeans. His hair is slightly tousled, as if he'd just woken up. His expression is unreadable, but his dark eyes study Mark carefully. Mark feels his throat tighten. He doesn't deserve to be here. He swallows the lump in his throat and forces himself to speak. "Mr. Hollywood icon." His voice fails him. He looks down, shame burning through him. Hollywood icon watches him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he steps aside. An invitation. Mark's breath catches. He hadn't expected this. He had prepared for anger, for rejection. But instead, Hollywood icon simply motions him inside. Mark hesitates, then steps forward. The door closes behind him. Inside, the house is warm, quiet. Not the lavish mansion Mark had expected. Instead, it feels lived in, human. Books line the walls, art scattered on the tables. Mark looks around, his pulse still unsteady. He's been in hundreds of homes, investigated crime scenes. But this feels different. Hollywood icon finally speaks. "I figured you'd come." Mark's breath catches. He hadn't expected that. "You did?" Hollywood icon nods, studying him carefully. "You had that look, the kind of pain that doesn't let you rest until you face it." Mark's throat tightens. He knows exactly what Hollywood icon means, but he doesn't know how to begin. Mark sits stiffly on the couch, his hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the floor. The silence between them is thick, pressing against his chest. The weight of why he's here, of everything he's done, makes his throat feel tight. Hollywood icon sits across from him, watching. His expression is calm, unreadable. He doesn't break the silence, doesn't demand an explanation. He just waits. Mark exhales shakily. His voice is hoarse when he finally speaks. "I don't even know where to start." Hollywood icon leans back, tilting his head slightly. "Start anywhere." Mark nods slowly, rubbing his hands together. "That night, I lost control." He hesitates, forcing himself to continue. "I was angry, at the world, at myself, and I took it out on you." Hollywood icon doesn't flinch. He doesn't interrupt. He just listens. Mark swallows. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Hollywood icon studies him for a moment, then speaks softly. "Maybe not, but that's not what this is about." Mark looks up, confusion flickering in his eyes. Then what is it about? Hollywood icon exhales, glancing toward the bookshelf before looking back at him. What do you want, Mark? The question throws him off. He isn't sure how to answer. I don't know. His voice is barely a whisper. I had to come. Hollywood icon nods as if he understands. Guilt is heavy. Mark grips his knees, knuckles whitening. You should hate me. Hollywood icon shakes his head. Hate is easy. Letting go is harder. Mark exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. I saw the letter. I don't get it. Why would you do that? Why would you show me kindness after what I did? Hollywood icon leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Because I know what it's like to be lost. The words hit Mark like a punch to the gut. Silence stretches between them. Mark clenches his jaw, his eyes burning. I betrayed your kindness. He hesitates, then pulls something from his pocket. A folded photo. He places it on the table between them, sliding it toward Hollywood icon. Hollywood icon picks it up. His expression softens as he recognizes it. A hospital room. Christmas Eve. A younger Mark. His sick wife. His daughter. And Hollywood icon in the background, holding gifts. Mark's voice is barely steady. You were there for my family when I wasn't. I never knew. Not until now. Hollywood icon looks at the photo for a long moment before setting it down. His voice is soft. I didn't do it for recognition. Mark nods, his throat tight. I know. The weight of everything presses on him. The pain, the regret, the guilt, it all comes pouring out. For the first time in years, Mark lets himself feel. Hollywood icon doesn't judge, doesn't interrupt. He just listens. The night air is cold as Mark steps out of Hollywood icon's house. His breath is visible in the dim glow of the porch light. He doesn't know what he expected from this meeting, but as he walks to his car, something inside him feels different, lighter, but not free, not yet. Mark grips the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead. His mind replays Hollywood icon's words over and over. Hate is easy. Letting go is harder. He exhales, rubbing his temples. He knows what he has to do next. The next morning, he stands outside a house he hasn't visited in months. A small suburban home, familiar yet distant. His stomach twists as he raises his hand to knock. The door opens. Emma stands there staring at him. His daughter, the little girl he once promised to protect, now a young woman with weary eyes. Her arms cross over her chest. Dad? Mark swallows hard. Emma. Silence stretches between them. The weight of time, of absence, of words left unsaid, all pressing down at once. Mark hesitates. I know I haven't been the father you needed. I let my grief take over. I pushed you away, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Emma's expression remains unreadable. Why now? Mark reaches into his pocket and pulls out something fragile with age, a photograph. He hands it to her. Emma takes it, her brow furrowing. What is this? She looks closer. The image of a hospital room, Christmas Eve, her mother smiling weakly from a bed, a younger version of herself beside her, and a man standing in the background. Emma gasps. Wait, this was that night. The man with the gifts. It was really him? Mark nods. Hollywood icon. I never realized it until now. Emma stares at the photo, her fingers trembling. Why does this change anything? Mark exhales. Because he saved us that night, and I repaid him with hate. His voice is tight. But I don't want to live like that anymore. I want to fix things, starting with you. Emma grips the photo, biting her lip. Mark braces himself for rejection. Then slowly she steps forward and wraps her arms around him. Mark freezes. He hadn't expected this. His arms tremble as they close around her, pulling her into a hug that feels both foreign and familiar. A whisper against his shoulder. I missed you. Mark's chest tightens. His voice cracks as he responds. I missed you too, sweetheart. Tears sting his eyes, but this time he doesn't hold them back. For the first time in years, he isn't running from his pain. It's the first real step forward. Months pass. Mark's life is unrecognizable. Each morning, he wakes up before sunrise, no longer dreading the day ahead. His uniform is gone. His badge sits in a drawer, untouched. He has chosen a new path, one that feels right for the first time in years. He works at a youth outreach center, helping kids who are slipping through the cracks. The ones the system ignores, the ones like him, lost and angry, searching for direction. At first, they don't trust him. Why should they? He was once the man they feared, the kind of cop they ran from. But he listens, not just to their words, but to what they don't say. Because he understands them, the bitterness, the pain, the loneliness. He sees himself in them. For the first time, he feels like he's making a real difference. One afternoon, as he finishes a session with a group of teens, a voice calls from the doorway. You're really doing it. Mark turns. Emma. She leans against the frame, watching him, her expression unreadable. Mark exhales, offering a small smile. I'm trying. Emma glances at the kids packing up their things. And they actually listen to you? Mark chuckles. More than you ever did. Emma smirks. That's fair. For a moment, silence stretches between them. Then softly she asks, Are you happy? Mark hesitates. Then finally he nods. I think. I'm starting to be. Emma smiles. It's small, but it's real. That night, Mark sits at his kitchen table, flipping through the old journal Hollywood Icon gave him. The pages are filled now. His thoughts, his regrets, the weight of his past. Writing has helped him process it all. Then, the television catches his attention. A breaking news segment, a press conference, a familiar name. Hollywood Icon. Mark turns up the volume. Hollywood Icon stands before a microphone, his voice steady, addressing the topic of accountability in law enforcement. He isn't just an actor. He's something more, a force for change. Mark shakes his head, a quiet chuckle escaping him. Hollywood Icon never wanted recognition, yet he was changing lives in ways he didn't even realize. The next morning, Mark heads to the youth center. As he sets down his bag, his phone buzzes. A message from Hollywood Icon, 4 simple words. Keep paying it forward. Mark exhales. He will. Mark never expected to hear from Hollywood Icon again. Yet just weeks after receiving that message, his phone rings. An unknown number. He hesitates, then answers. Mark. The voice is unmistakable, calm, steady. Mark grips the phone tighter. Hollywood Icon? A pause. Then, I've been thinking about your story. There's something you should know. Mark straightens in his chair. What is it? Hollywood Icon's voice is softer now, tinged with something Mark can't quite place. That night at the hospital, I wasn't just there to help others. I was visiting someone. Mark's pulse quickens. Who? Silence stretches for a long moment. Then Hollywood Icon exhales. My sister. Mark's breath catches. He hadn't expected that. Hollywood Icon continues, his voice quieter now. Her name was Kim. She was fighting leukemia. I spent every moment I could with her, but no amount of money, no doctors, no treatments could save her. That Christmas Eve, I was there for her. But seeing your family, it reminded me why I was fighting to hold on. Mark grips the edge of the table, his fingers tightening. His mind flashes back to the hospital, the dim hallways, the quiet figure standing near the doorway. He had been too consumed by grief to notice anyone else. Now, it all makes sense. Hollywood Icon wasn't just helping strangers that night. He was losing someone too. Mark clears his throat, his voice barely above a whisper. I had no idea. You wouldn't have, Hollywood Icon says simply. Pain teaches us. It can break us or it can make us kinder. Mark blinks back unexpected tears. I spent years letting it break me. Hollywood Icon is quiet for a moment. Then softly, but you're not anymore. Mark exhales, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to thank you. Hollywood Icon chuckles, the sound light but full of something deeper. You already have. Mark swallows hard, gripping the phone, trying to find the right words. I don't think I'd have changed if not for that night. Hollywood Icon's voice is steady. Sometimes it takes being broken to start rebuilding. Mark lets the words settle. He had spent years angry, lost in grief, punishing the world for what had been taken from him. He had let it turn him into someone he no longer recognized. And yet, in the face of all of that, Hollywood Icon forgave him. The call ends, but Mark doesn't move. He stays there, gripping the phone, staring at nothing. For the first time in his life, he truly understands. He finally lets go. Mark never thought he'd reach this place. A version of himself that wasn't consumed by anger or regret. A version that wasn't drowning in his past. But here he is. Months have passed since his conversation with Hollywood Icon. Life hasn't magically fixed itself, but something inside him has changed. He wakes up every morning with purpose, with clarity. His work at the Youth Outreach Center has become his life. The kids, the ones society has written off, remind him of himself in ways he never imagined. They're angry, lost, hurting. But he listens, and slowly they begin to trust him. One evening, after a long day at the center, he sits in his small apartment, flipping through his journal. Hollywood Icon's words from their last conversation still echo in his mind. Sometimes it takes being broken to start rebuilding. His phone buzzes. A new message. Hollywood Icon, how are you holding up? Mark smiles. He types a response. Mark, better. Still. Hollywood Icon's reply comes instantly. That's all any of us can do. Mark exhales. He knows Hollywood Icon isn't someone who needs gratitude, but he still feels it every single day. The next morning, he heads back to the outreach center. A new kid has joined today, a 15-year-old boy, withdrawn, eyes heavy with something Mark recognizes too well: pain. Mark walks over, sits beside him. The boy doesn't look up. "You don't have to talk," Mark says, "but if you ever want to, I'll be here." The boy shifts but doesn't respond. Mark nods. He's been there. He understands. It won't happen overnight, but in time, he hopes the boy will see what Mark has learned. There's always a way forward. As he heads home that evening, the city lights blur through his windshield. He thinks about the man he used to be, the choices he made, the anger he held. Then he thinks about Hollywood Icon, how one act of kindness, a quiet moment of generosity, changed everything. He knows now that it's not about making up for the past. It's about what he does next. And so, he chooses to pay it forward.